that time of year. Win in advance, and the Bills did that for the fourth year in a row in the wild card round. They beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 31-17 at Highmark Stadium, so they'll move on to the divisional round. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast, everyone.
And I'm Jon Scott. I don't know, maybe I'll use some snark in this episode or not as we move along in the postseason here. Kevin, honestly, it's funny because I think it played a very similar script to a lot of what we've seen from this Bills season, whether it be the offense looks good, you get encouraged, and then boom, they stop moving the football, and you wonder why is it so difficult, and they get away from the things that were working so well on the defensive side of things. You're watching guys get injured left and right and thinking, how can this continue to happen to this team? And for the most part, I think they did a decent job at plugging in guys to make some plays, some more so than others. And then obviously we will turn that conversation into just initially, because we'll get more into it as the week moves along, but the Kansas City Chiefs finally coming to Orchard Park in the postseason.
You said snark. I honestly thought you were going to say snot because you've got a runny nose from being out in the cold doing the post-game report. But, yeah, here we are, a game that was pushed back a day because of a snowstorm that came in off of Lake Erie. So they play at 4:30 on a Monday. I thought it worked out fine, John, but you're right. When this game started, this was going to be a runaway blowout. The Bills were getting turnovers. They were marching down the field and getting touchdowns. And then a whole lot of nothing, John. But I will say this. When you look at what had to happen as the game went on, you brought up the injuries that they were dealing with on defense. We're talking about defensive backs and linebackers, John. There's going to be a lot to have to address with that, but you also had players stepping up when they had to. And what I think needed to happen at some point during that second half, and I know ultimately the Steelers only got to 17. They didn't get to 21. But I really think that the Bills needed some key drives at some point in that second half, and they got them with Josh Allen leading the way. And, I could watch that touchdown by Khalil Shakir on repeat over and over again. It was just what needed to happen happened, even with the Bills when they kind of slowed down and they started dealing with adversity on defense.
It was, I think, an instance out the gate of this postseason that exemplified and showed something we had discussed going into this game of, is this team, this version of the Buffalo Bills, best suited for a postseason run than previous teams simply because of all that they've had to go through? They have had injuries. They've had a coaching change. Frankly, they haven't looked that good offensively, and yet they have still, through all of that, found ways to win and get into the postseason. And maybe, as we had discussed going in, the Bills almost winning ugly, maybe winning with a C+, B- game, especially offensively, against New England or against the Rams, or the Chargers, or even, frankly, dragging their feet in the Miami game in Week 18 until finally kind of figuring it out at the end. These are games and circumstances where it was believed going in that it should not be that hard. And the Bills just had to grind it out. And this is one where, boom, they're out of the cannon 21-0. It looks like the route is on. And then the blocked kick, then the injuries, then the lull offensively, and all of this stuff. And these are instances where maybe in previous years, oh no, what's going to happen? Can the Bills stop the bleeding and get out on top? Yeah, they have against teams maybe the caliber of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Can you live this way against teams like the Kansas City Chiefs next week? I don't know. But the Bills have shown, regardless of the caliber of opponent, they don't have to necessarily be their best to ultimately come out with the best outcome.
When they came out of the bye week and there was all this talk that the playoffs start now for us and they had to win X amount of games and I got concerned, to be honest with you, that would catch up with them by the time the playoffs actually started, putting in so much to just get into the postseason. But I've kind of flipped that around in my own head, and now I'm with that camp right now, John, that said all that they've gone through. You know, you look at some of those teams that just fight their way to get into the playoffs, and then they start clicking at the right time. You know, you can go back to the New York Giants in '07 who ended up beating the Patriots. They just heated up at the right time, John, and were on fire throughout that entire playoffs. And you can see the Bills. I thought at times during the game against the Steelers, we saw what we want to see from the Bills offense. They look like the Bills offense. And I'm not going to make excuses, but there were some drops like we've seen throughout the season, John, and just some miscommunication that I think killed some of these drives that if something just happened to I think it was Dawson Knox dropped a ball on one of the drives that would have been like a 12-yard gain, and they would have been off and running again, but then that just derailed everything.
Right, execution, mistakes, self-inflicted wounds. It wasn't turnovers against the Steelers, which is something that has plagued this team, and in particular Josh Allen, most of this season and dug them into some unnecessary holes. They avoided that this time around, but you're right. 21-0, then we can get into the decision-making for trying to kick the field goal that was blocked, that Sam Martin got hurt on, that then allowed Pittsburgh to open the door to get onto the scoreboard to make it 21-7. But after that, you're right. The Dawson Knox, I believe that was the opening drive of the second half, and it was early on. Boom, Knox makes a touchdown earlier, and that's kind of the inconsistencies of what he has been. Allen sometimes misses some throws, whatever it may be. But those are the things that when they're grooving, we're not asking them to be perfect. This wasn't necessarily expected to be, even though the temperatures and kind of the settings seem the same. The no-punt, incredible performance against the Patriots in the wild card game a couple years ago. But they looked great in that. You talk about the first few drives. I wrote in my notes 10 for 80, 5 minutes and 33 seconds. Every single play on that opening touchdown drive for the Bills offense, they gained positive yards, even if it was just one. But it was 5, 4, 1, 20, 10, 4, 12, 12, 3, and 9. And a lot of it, even the more chunk-type plays, was simply taking what the defense was giving them. And that's where, how many times on this show, dating back to the Jets game, the Washington game, the Raiders game, saying things of just take be methodical, be easy, and just roll down the field. And that's what the Bills did out the gate. I loved that after the turnover, they take a shot to Kincaid on a beautiful throw by Josh Allen. And then Allen does Allen things. It's 21-0 with a 52-yard run. And you're like, oh, do you think this team maybe just flipped a switch and they're actually going to be the team that we thought? And then they had to battle through some things. Encouraging, yes, but you still wish it was more of a steady thing. And maybe they don't have to score every single possession, but it just maybe looks a little cleaner. But positives, I think it's fair to, even though it's just win at this point in time, I think it's fair to maybe more look at the positives rather than that little lull that they might have hit early in the second half.
Yeah, you did bring up the field goal attempt that I know on social media you didn't agree with going for the field goal there. I quite frankly didn't at where you were on the field and where you were in the game with from what at least I was hearing on the broadcast was how the wind was coming in and going up into the kickers at that point. And then you almost lose your punter on top of it, or, I mean, we'll find out what happened to Sam Martin. But, I mean, it's a bad day injury-wise when even your punter is getting injured, you know? And I didn't agree with the decision there. They were holding the Steelers' offense in check. They were having their way with what Mason Rudolph and the Steelers were trying to do on offense. And no harm, no foul if you go for it there and don't get it at that point in the game. And then it ends up, like I said here in the newsroom, they just let the Steelers back in the game with that
100
one single play, and you knew the Steelers were getting a touchdown.
100%. 100%. What was it, a couple years ago when the Steelers in the opener blocked a punt against the Bills and returned it for a touchdown, and that kind of swung things in that game as well. Obviously, the Bills won this one. So it was 4th and 7 on the Pittsburgh 31. The end, that's the end that they're going in. I call it the closed end of the stadium where not the tunnel is, where the team comes out. I was watching pregame warm-up. Sam Martin, great punter, AFC Special Teams Player of the Month. He was having a heck of a time driving the ball at all, going in that direction over my shoulder for those watching on YouTube. And that's pretty common here in Highmark Stadium. So it's not really something new that tunnel side's a little easier to kick into as opposed to the opposite end where the scoreboard is. And that was the case here. Even if it wasn't apparent with the flags and the poles like whipping all over the place, you just kind of knew. At least I did. And so I didn't like it. 4th and 7, 31. Your defense is playing well. You could go for a legit kill shot because it's 21-0. And I think more so, the risk-reward, let's go worst-case scenario. They don't get it. It's a 31. Or maybe Josh does one of his arm punts, and it's interception, and it's even pinned down a little bit more. I just didn't like it, and I think part of the reason it was blocked is because Tyler Bass, it appeared maybe trying to go a little lower trajectory, really get into it. It was blocked, and then Sam Martin trying to run it down because Sam Martin was criticized, I forget, what was it, a kick return or a punt return or something, for not really putting much of an effort into it. And there he's running, and he grabs the back of his leg, and I've had a slight hamstring pull before where it just feels like a ball just kind of knots up in the back of your thigh. I mean, it's horrible. And I think the weather probably contributing to that more than anything. Give props to Sam Martin. I thought he was only going to stay in the game and be able to hold, but he pops out a little later in the halftime, comes on out after Tyler Bass was taking some practice punts, and he had a 45-yard punt, really on one leg, but Sean McDermott did say we're going to have to kind of see. We understand with adrenaline or whatever the heck maybe they're given, you can fight your way through when the muscle's still a little warm, even though it was so cold. And it's maybe the day or two afterwards where it gets really sore and tightens up, and that's really where you become more hindered. It's probably going to be a tall order to ask Sam Martin to punt again next week, and then that leaves the Bills with Sam Martin's been up and down, but he's up right now. Again, Conference Special Teams Player of the Month, was even kicking really well before the injury in this game. That's a loss in a game that field position is going to matter next weekend.
It's hard to believe, like, it never dawns on you, John, when you're watching a football game and, we can bag on kickers and punters all we want, but the realization that you might not have a punter for the rest of the game was just, the thought never crosses your mind, but you're like, start wondering, wait a minute, didn't Tyler Bass punt a little in college or maybe in high school, or is he going to be able to get them through the game? And you don't want to have him be kicking and punting for the rest of the playoffs. So it does put them in a pickle on top of all the other injuries that they accumulated on defense, John. It was just amazing on who had to be called on. Like some of the other scenarios in this, the Bills used both their challenges in the first half. I thought the second one was a no-brainer to use when it happened, but it didn't go the Bills' way. You're losing your punter. You're losing defensive backs. You're losing the guy who calls the signals for the defense in the huddle is lost, and a guy who was on his couch a few weeks ago comes in, and now he's the one calling. Just incredible how this thing unfolded. The fact that the Bills actually hung on to a 31-17 win. We've been saying this a lot with all the injuries the Bills dealt with on defense throughout the year, that Sean McDermott's done a great job. I thought he did another great job tonight with getting the guys where they needed to be. But for a fact he's going to probably have to have his best game as a defensive coordinator coming up this coming Sunday.
Terrell Bernard's the big one. And he's the one who all but certainly is not going to be back, certainly for Kansas City. And honestly, we don't know what it is. I saw him on crutches in the locker room. He went in for x-rays and was immediately ruled out of the game. It looked like maybe an air cast on the field when he was carted off. Right ankle. It does not look good. he's been sensational. And I thought he got a raw deal this week with the All-Pro voting. Really wasn't even in consideration. And for all that he's done in terms of interceptions and sacks and fumble recoveries and all of that, in the mix again this afternoon in that first turnover, it's big. And you talk about maybe the biggest, oh, I was wrong. Oh, you were wrong. We all were wrong of the Bills' 2023 into 2024 season. Terrell Bernard's at the top of that list. Any of you that are listening or watching, let's not all act like you went into the season week 1 in September after not even seeing Terrell Bernard play because he was hurt during the preseason and say, oh, we good. Remember Christian Kirksey was signed and everyone's wondering, oh my gosh, is that guy going to be the starting middle linebacker? And then he retires and you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be Tyrell Dodson or A.J. Klein or whatever. I mean, nobody knew. And then Bernard's been sensational. I think we've seen the dynamic athleticism and playmaking that comes with it throughout the season. I think his communication obviously has been good. Now, Klein's been in this McDermott offense or defense for a long time. Dodson's been in it. I think they're both very capable of that element of being the middle linebacker for this defense, and that's communicating and getting people in the right spot. But in terms of playmaking and difference makers, especially against a team that likes to play in the middle of the field with a future Hall of Fame first ballot guy like Travis Kelce, losing Bernard going into that game and beyond is going to be huge. That one, not to diminish a Balin Spector or Christian Benford, who's been sensational, or Taron Johnson, who was named a second-team All-Pro. Those are big losses. But I feel like the Bills are more insulated to navigate those than maybe the Terrell Bernard loss. That to me, is right on par with losing a Matt Milano.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned Christian Benford, John, and he's out. Kyer Elam comes in, the former first-round pick of the Bills. Struggles at first, but then comes up with a big interception in the end zone that led to that long Josh Allen run later in the first half.
Trucked by Pat Freiermuth.
Oh, I forgot about that one.
And you're thinking, all right, he's got to make the tackle. It's third down. Boom, he gets run over. Next play, defensive pass interference. And just as fast as everyone's typing, oh, Christian Benford's out. What's wrong with him? Kyer Elam's in. Oh, this is the bad Kyer Elam. Now we're seeing it once again. He makes a good play. I got to be honest with you. I don't know how he caught the football. Right. I mean, I know it was like at him. It was great coverage and not a good decision by Mason Rudolph, but he literally turned his head and the ball was on him. To have that concentration and ball skills to actually make the catch, I think was good. The interesting thing with Elam to me, and I've had a few conversations with Kyer, you know that, over the past year plus since he joined the team. I really like his candor and his honesty. And he said after the game, listen, I've heard people throw that label bust around. And he said a few months ago when he's battling injury and trying to work his way back, the mental side of it, he was in a tough spot. And he says maybe a few months ago, I wouldn't have been able to step onto the field rusty because he hasn't had a whole lot of reps with where he is on the depth chart and be able to make a play like he did. It was critical. Second year in a row now, he's made a big interception in the wild card game for the Buffalo Bills. Does this mean Kyer Elam's going to ascend into the player he was picked to be? I certainly don't think it guarantees that. Do I think Kyer Elam's going to need to be relied upon in some capacity the rest of the way, however long this playoff run goes? Yes. I'm not sure. It sounds like Rasul Douglas maybe feels that he will be good to go next week, which would be big. Him and Dane Jackson if Christian Benford's not able to play. But the depth, I mean, clearly, a game like this, a battle of attrition, a season of attrition, you have to be able to count in some capacity that they could at least keep their head above water, and I think we saw that from Kyer tonight.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny. Because of this game getting moved to Monday, it's now a short week for the Bills. And when dealing with those injuries, when the game got moved from Sunday to the Monday, it was like, well, maybe that gives Rasul Douglas time to get healthier. Now you're in a shorter week, John. You have all these injuries piling up. You have the defending Super Bowl champs coming to where you want them at Highmark Stadium, it's hard to feel that you aren't going to need Josh Allen in that Bills offense to get into a place where they're putting up a lot of points next week, because it looks like just where we sit today following the game that it's going to be a situation where Josh Allen and company are going to have to do that.
I don't necessarily think, and again, we'll get to the actual matchup with the Chiefs later this upcoming week in a couple days, because like you said, it's a short week. But I don't think it's necessarily, all right, the Bills are banged up with injuries again, they're just going to fall off. I don't think that's the case. And again, I feel like some of these pieces, it may not be, oh, you're going to have to start Kyer Elam, because I think maybe Douglas or Benford can play, whatever it may be. But I do agree with the point of this. It's playoff time. Josh Allen is the Madden cover boy. He's the face of the franchise. He's the best quarterback and, honestly, best player this organization has had since those 90s teams and maybe ever. And if this team's ever, this year, next year, whatever it may be, if they're ever going to win a Super Bowl, Josh Allen has to be that caliber of a quarterback. And you would like him to be that caliber of a quarterback when the defense is full strength, and it's easy. But that's not the reality right now. And so Josh Allen, first half version, that's what you need. And maybe that last drive in the fourth quarter when they put this game away, that's what you're going to need, whether it's the Kansas City Chiefs, the Pittsburgh Steelers, whoever it is. So it was encouraging, again, to go back to that, to see Allen not forcing the football, making the right throws, beautiful passes, not missing guys down the field when the opportunities presents itself, Joe Brady calling a great game, guys doing their job. That's what you need, because defense can carry you, and it's done a really, really good job as the offense has searched a lot this season. But the way this team is built, Josh Allen's going to have to be the one leading that horse, leading the wagon into the postseason and through it. And I think that's even amplified more so if they're going to be undermanned on D.
Stefon Diggs, John, catching a lot of short passes in this one, catching a huge pass downfield on 3rd and long when Josh needed to get a ball to him. But where do you think things stand right now with the usage of Stefon Diggs? I know they had a couple of those bubble screens that I can't stand that actually picked up some yards on a couple of them. But with Gabe Davis out, Stefon Diggs was still able to get his, I think, in this game, and I think is getting back into a groove right now as we hit the postseason.
Josh threw for 203. So to expect Diggs to finally get back to over 100 yards receiving and all of that, I don't think is realistic, right? I mean, he only had 203 yards. 9 targets, 7 receptions for 52 yards. That's what you want. Diggs needs to be 9, 10-plus targets per game. And when he was in that weird time of the Rams game, or excuse me, I do that again, Chargers game and the New England game and whatnot, you're thinking, why? Again, he's not even on the field. The targets were down on top of just the production. Last couple weeks, Miami, and now this game, targets are there, yardage, catches. It's not over the top. It's not all pro level Stefon Diggs. But also, if you just kind of break it down fractions-wise, I mean, he had 25% of Allen's receptions, yardage, and things like that. I'm comfortable with where Diggs is now. But if I'm going to say Josh Allen needs to be Superman and MVP caliber for this team to make a deep run and go for a Super Bowl, I think there's going to have to be a moment or multiple moments where Stefon Diggs is Stefon Diggs again. And I know L'Jarius Sneed is a good cornerback. He had that viral moment, I even tweeted about it, where he jammed the snot out of Tyreek Hill and put him in the ground, and Tyreek ultimately was like, hey, he jammed me all the way to Cancun on vacation. I think we've talked ad nauseum. It doesn't matter who lines up against Stefon Diggs. He can beat anyone in the league. And if it's not next week against the Chiefs, which I think it could be, it should be, but at some point, if this season's going to continue to move forward, Allen needs to be Allen, and Diggs needs to be Diggs because your top dogs have to be your top dogs.
And Khalil Shakir could just keep on amazing week after week. Before you came on the postgame show, I was talking to Fred Jackson about how there was talk of Khalil Shakir not making the team before training camp started. And I know we've talked about this during the season on how he continues to deliver and he's got good hands and he's always in the right place. But what he did against the Steelers when it was really needed, and who knows, maybe the Bills end up scoring anyways, but that extra effort in that touchdown was amazing, John.
How many Khalil Shakir moments, let's just say the last 5-6 games, can you remember? Plays. What about the Chargers game? Hey, I got it right that time.
There you
where
go.
it was ultimately not called a touchdown, but it set up the game-winning field goal. You remember that play. You remember that one. What about the 80-plus yard touchdown reception he had? Was that the Dallas game? Or
No, it was either the Jets.
yes, I think it was the Jets game. But just these moments, this game, even the Miami game, he goes back and catches that ball for a critical first down. He makes a good catch that sets up the Dawson Knox touchdown in Miami as well. You just remember these moments. And again, 3 for 31, 17-yard play was his long. These are not he's the one leading the way and we need to have this conversation. Is he the new number 2 and all of this? No, but he's the perfect complementary guy that does what he's asked to do, and when the opportunity presents itself, time and time again, almost 100%, almost he's batting 1,000 in terms of, hey, we need you to make a play at the most critical time, and he seems to do it. And so he has really found a great role, and as we've discussed, I still think Diggs, maybe a Kincaid, Cook, some sort of if you want to go 2, 3, I don't care who it is. And I think Shakir now is that fourth guy who has the potential and when given the chance could rise and be the best player on the field that day because it's asked and they need him to be. But I think he's just this, all right, we need it now. This is where the ball's going. You know, every single time Allen goes his way, it seems like he's going to get the job done. And those types of players in those roles are the ones you look back on championship caliber teams and say, wow, they were pretty loaded. You remember this play and this play and this play. Khalil Shakir fits that role, and we'll find out if it's for a championship team.
Yeah, you mentioned Dalton Kincaid too, John, and it seems like now as we got later in the season in that touchdown strike today, using Kincaid more now on how we all thought the Bills were going to use him with stretching down the middle of the field, gets that touchdown in this one. We've seen deeper passes to him in L.A. against the Chargers. Was that one? Or one against the Patriots? Now you're confusing me.
One of these, down this stretch, you're right. And, I mean, what Kincaid did here is exactly why the Bills were so excited to get him. Who's going to guard him? They, Pittsburgh, decided Miles Jack. And coming out of UCLA, that guy was considered to be a super athletic. It's been a long time, and it hasn't worked out for him in the league. A linebacker on Dalton Kincaid down the seam with Josh Allen throwing frozen ropes. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's easy money. It's light work. I mean, every single time, if that's the matchup, it is a plus matchup for the Bills and Kincaid. And if Allen can make the throw, which more times than not he can, that's going to be big plays there. Another one, I think it was the Patriots game. It wasn't up the seam. It was more like a post pattern to the boundary, and another deep, big play for him there. It's maybe not in the volume that you expected of, okay, Kincaid's going to get 6, 7 and for 80, 90, but moments and capitalizing on the matchups at certain times. I think that's where you're seeing as this Bills offense, again, that pecking order of Diggs, is it Cook, is it Kincaid, then is it Shakir? I think you're kind of finding the Bills offense, you're seeing that they're finding their way of their comfort level of how to utilize their weapons. Dawson Knox as well, which, by the way, Dawson Knox tied for second all-time for most postseason touchdowns in Bills history.
Right. I think
receptions, that is.
Did I see something that he scored the first touchdown in like every Bills wild card game or something silly like that. I know when you go back to the Patriots game a couple of years ago that we were referencing, he had that first catch that sparked everything. I thought we were going to get something like that as well. John, and then real quick, James Cook, when the Bills needed to run some clock, I think James Cook came to play here in the playoffs just by watching him in this. I still think the Bills need to use him more in the passing game or be smarter with him in the passing game, but he looked more like the James Cook against the Cowboys and against, who was it, Tampa Bay maybe, or the Broncos, where they needed to run some clock, and he was able to do it and rip off big chunk plays. I did say your guy Leonard Fournette was not in the game. Don't know how you feel about that decision that the Bills made today, but at any rate, James Cook looking like the guy he was a few weeks ago.
18 for 79, 4.5 per carry, and a lot of those runs down the stretch. He was pretty efficient. He had good bursts, ripping off some good chunks. Not every time, but I thought he looked good, looked better than he has down the stretch. I actually think you articulated his usage in the passing game perfectly. He needs to be smarter. 4 targets, 4 catches for 5 yards, and as long as 4. It was a lot of failed screens. The Bills, I don't know, man. It's so strange to me how they stink at screen passes, whether it's to the running backs or the wide receivers, and they're not particularly great at defending them either. Jaylen Warren, I think, got a little loose on one as well. I don't get it. I wouldn't mind putting Cook in the slot every now and again and get him on a linebacker or a safety. I know that with Shakir really elevating and Kincaid and all of this, maybe that's not opening up a spot, but I would at least have a package or two where let's get Cook on a backer or a safety or even a nickel. And if they're going to do that, someone else has got to have a good matchup or something like that. That's something I would like to see instead of just trying to get him on, these swing screens and things like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's the thing when you watch football the entire weekend, like we got to do with the Bills being moved to Monday. You see teams do that all the time with their running backs, John. That somehow they get the ball to their running back. We saw Pittsburgh do it. You brought it up. We see other teams do that, and it gets frustrating that they're not able to do that with Cook, and I think they should be able to. It doesn't make sense why it's just not happening.
The wheel routes, I think, are something that you could really hit them on, and maybe they're calling them, and I'm not noticing them because the ball's going elsewhere. But I feel like he should be utilized more diversely in the passing game than what it appears he is.
All right, I'll ask you this before we head out because people are asking me, and I don't care and I don't know, but is Taylor Swift coming to Buffalo for the Bills-Chiefs game?
I know my wife is one of the thousands in Western New York and Buffalo that are hoping that she is. I don't know. I don't know her attendance record in terms of road games. I don't think she has a tour right now. I know she's going international at some point here in 2024 because we were failed at getting tickets when she comes back stateside or even up in Toronto. Shout out to anyone if you have reasonably priced tickets for Taylor Swift in Toronto. Just drop your name in the comments. We can have a conversation. I'd win Husband of the Year. But I don't know. I think it'll be cool if she does. And like we've discussed on here, I have no problem with the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce, NFL phenomenon and the way she's kind of overtaken things. I think it's kind of cool. I thought her jacket was pretty dope, to be honest with you. I know Kyle Juszczyk's wife, so he's a fullback, for San Francisco now or Baltimore? One of those two. He's played for both. She made him. I thought it was cool. And, Bill's quarterback has a pretty talented musician girlfriend, so maybe they can, have a sing-off or something at halftime.
Yeah, do that at halftime. I guess we'll see as the week goes on, John. Again, I really don't care, but my niece was asking if there were tickets around, if she was going to be around. I was like, I don't know. Today, because of the snow, there were tickets available for like $60. But who knows? We won't deal with the weather, John, on this one as we wrap it up. We'll let the week play out. And then, again, it's Bills divisional round hosting the Chiefs this time. We'll keep track of health and injury updates and all that stuff as the week goes on. But again, another wild card win for the Bills. So they are moving on, and John and I are moving on right now, but we will be back with you with the Buffalo End Zone podcast previewing the game coming out on Wednesday, with the Bills set to take the field after 6 o'clock, the final game of the weekend on Sunday. John, by the way, I've literally sat here and watched them tarp up the field behind you this entire podcast. Just slowly, one every 10 yards at a time, just slowly moving their way down. It looks like they're on the 10-yard line now. All right, I'll let you go, John.
Well, my last thing will be, number one, shout out to the dude who I got a picture on Twitter who rocked a Stone Cold Steve Austin vest over his Josh Allen jersey while shoveling. Also, I would love to hear in the comments of this, if you were in the stadium, your thoughts of when you came to your seat and it was 2 feet, 3 feet buried of snow, or you watched someone who's got there before you shovel all of the snow from their seat onto yours, or if you were at a level below and I just watched even a security guard here or an usher shovel snow off the 200 level onto the people below them in the 100 level. It was truly everyone for themselves. It's community, it's a city of good neighbors, but it was like, I'm going to make this little area of mine here at Highmark Stadium the most livable and usable, and I don't care who I have to then make it more challenging for to accomplish that.
And you won't get that kind of atmosphere if you built a dome here, John. I think
wouldn't that have actually been great?
I think we can all agree on that. All right, for Jon Scott, I'm Kevin Carroll. As always, thanks for joining us, everyone.